All right, my Bible in 365 brothers and sisters, we have arrived at the wonderful book of Lamentations. And folks, this is one that is so misunderstood by so many. But by the time I'm done today, I hope you will be encouraged by what generally is perceived to be a terribly tragic book, but it really isn't because of what I'm going to read to you. Now, I want to say this because there is a lot of foundation necessary to understand why it's called the Book of Lamentations. And I want to simply say that if you want to dig deeper, you can go to jamescadiz.com and get all the Bible studies that go into this in depth. But I'm going to try to give you a quick version of what's going on here so that you will be able to run with this in a way that will deeply encourage you. And if you are in the same state of mind that I am in right now, especially mourning and grieving so much loss, then you will love this passage. But here we have to go to a very important section of Jewish history, and we have to go back to the point where Jeremiah is called by God to go to the southern kingdom and to minister to the southern kingdom of Judah. Now, as I've spoken many times before, there was a civil war that ensued in all of Israel when it was a unified kingdom under the leadership of the last king to rule the nation of Israel as it was unified, and that was Solomon's son, Rehoboam. Now, there was a division between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and as a result, the northern king of Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, under what would be the future king of Israel, split apart from the southern kingdom. Now, the northern kingdom of Israel was 12 tribes, and it was referred to as Israel. So when you heard about Israel after the time that the nation split, it was oftentimes in reference to, all the time, for the most part, in reference to the northern kingdom of Israel. And then you had what was called the southern kingdom of Judah. 10 tribes to the north, the remaining tribes to the south. Now, it's important to note this because all of the southern kingdom was ruled by all of David's descendants, and the kings of the northern kingdom were all wicked men. There was no dynasty involved, and every single one of them was unrighteous. There were many righteous kings in the southern kingdom, which is why the southern kingdom survived a lot longer than the northern kingdom. However, Jeremiah, near the end, went to the southern kingdom and said, you must get your life right. You must repent. You must give God what God is asking of you. This related, by the way, to the Sabbath of the land that the southern kingdom was not walking in obedience concerning. And God said, you better repent, because if you don't, Nebuchadnezzar is going to come in and he's going to destroy you. And even with the warnings, the people of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judah, ignored what Jeremiah was saying. And finally, Jeremiah said it. It's no longer a repent so that you can avoid the consequence operation. It is a you better give in to Nebuchadnezzar when he comes in, because if you don't, so many people are going to die. And of course, Jeremiah was 100% correct. The first siege of 3 sieges happened with Nebuchadnezzar in 605 BC. That would have been the siege, by the way, that Daniel was taken away in. And then the second of those 3 sieges happened in 595 BC, and this would have been the siege in which Ezekiel was taken away in. And then there was the third siege, which ended on the 9th of Av, 586 BC, and that is when the temple was destroyed. That is when Jerusalem was completely and savagely destroyed, and over 500,000 men, women, and children died on that day when that terrible thing happened. And of course, Jeremiah saw it all take place and was deeply affected by it, and he lamented, he cried. That's oftentimes why we refer to him as the weeping prophet. And when we get into the book of Lamentations, that's exactly what it's talking about. It is the lamentations of Jeremiah concerning the destruction of the southern kingdom. And so this is very important to understand this. Now, I want everybody to understand that as we go through the section of Lamentations that I think is going to be critical for us to be able to know, I want you to know why I picked this passage. We are talking about Lamentations chapter 3. We're going to get into this section, And I really love this because this section sits at the very center of the book. By the way, both literally and theologically, okay? Lamentations is written as 5 poems or laments, as we would refer to them, and chapters 1, 2, 4, and 5 are laments of devastation, but chapter 3, which by the way is its longest and most personal poem, contains this super beautiful, radiant beam of hope in the middle of judgment. And again, I want everybody to understand that as I teach through this section, I want you to recognize what the real meaning of Lamentations is, and that is hope in God's covenant and his faithfulness amid the ruin that takes place. And I want you to get this, because this means, if you will understand it, that God's promises to Israel are not void. And if God's promises to Israel are not void, then that means God's promise for salvation is not void upon us. And in a time of tragedy, we can find hope and peace in everything that is said here. And we talked about this, okay? We recognize why this means something and why this is such a big deal. So let's read this, and we're going to be in Lamentations chapter 3. We're going to get into verse 21, and I'm going to go all the way through verse 26, and I'll start the very first verse here. It says this I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. By the way, I want to stop here because this is such an important section right here of Lamentations, and one that we really need to consider. When he says, this I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope, what he's saying or what he's doing is he is making it clear that he's choosing to make a deliberate mental decision. He's making a choice, actually a decision. He's cutting off any other opportunities, any other possibilities. The decision that he's making is to remember God's nature instead of the circumstances that he is in the midst of. And you have to keep this in mind. That's where hope begins. Hope does not begin with the change in our situation. It actually begins when we change our focus. And that's what Jeremiah is doing here. That's precisely what he's doing here. And that's why this is so monumental. Look at verse 22. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. You know, part of seeking out hope and part of understanding and recognizing the hand of God in your life is also recognizing your complicity in the very things that happen here. And I think that's really important. Let me read verse 22 to you, because this is going to become even more value. Actually, 23. It says, they are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. We should talk about this, because there's so much hope in being able to understand what this means. Look, verse 22, we see God's mercies given to us, his steadfast love. They are the reason why the nation was not utterly destroyed. There was still a remnant, and he recognizes that. His compassions fail not. They're new every morning. God's faithfulness is not a one-time act, folks. Never will be. It's a daily renewal of his deep and covenantal love. That for you, you might have a bad day, you might be having or going through a bad period, but God says, my blessing to you is going to come to you renewed every morning. Why? Because God's faithful. He's more faithful than I'll ever be, and we can find that hope that in the darkness of night, you will always wake up in the morning to recognize that the newness of God's compassion, the newness of God's touch in your life because of his greatness is waiting for you. I think there's something to be said about that. Look what he says next. Oh, I love this. Verse 24, the Lord is my portion, saith my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. Oh, I love that statement. Why do I love that statement so much? I love that statement because he speaks about the fact that God is his inheritance. By the way, this comes right out of Leviticus. When the Levites would say that God was their portion, it's the same principle. Even when everything material is gone, God himself is enough. This is an echo of what the Levites would say oftentimes, because the Levites didn't have the land allotment given to them or any of those things. But the fact that they had the ability to serve the Lord and walk with him, that in and of itself was the portion that they rendered, that they needed. And that's where they found fulfillment. And that's where we need to recognize that the Lord is our portion, that as we serve him, we find everything we need to move forward in all that he's given to us. Look what it says here in verse 25. The Lord is good unto them that wait for him, to the soul that seeketh him. Oh, is that so true? Oh, is that so true? May we seek God with a whole mind, with a whole heart, with the very depths of our soul. And I love this verse 26. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. I hope that's where your hope is, everybody. I hope your hope is in the salvation of the Lord, that there is nothing anybody can take away as it relates to this hope, that man cannot remove it, that a bullet cannot remove it, that death on this earth cannot remove it. Your hope is eternally founded in what God has done for you because he loves you with an everlasting love. And for all of you that are discouraged right now, understand that in the midst of the turmoil, guys, I think this is so incredible. When I told you this was literally at the center of the book, not just physically, but theologically, I think God did that on purpose. Because in the midst of the worst time of our life, God is here to tell you, not only is there hope, but there is strength. Not only is it a survival, you're not surviving, you're going to thrive. That you will be, as the book of Romans says, more than conquerors because God has extraordinary plans for you. So keep looking to him and seek him and recognize, guys. Look, you got to recognize this because the Bible tells us this. God is hard at work. He's doing something very special. Let him do it and watch God show up in incredible ways. And then I'm going to go back to you and say, I told you so, because God's faithful. I love you guys. You keep fighting the good fight. I cannot wait to see you, by the way, at AmFest for our Q&A. It's going to be incredible, and we are going to have a great time together. Keep looking to the Lord. Seek him. God is faithful, and he's good. And don't forget to pray on the 31st of October because it is one of the darkest days of the year, and we're not giving that day to the enemy. All right? I love you guys. God bless you, and keep fighting the good fight.